G'day folks, talk to Rosemary Kayess, the Australian Disability Discrimination Commissioner. A wealth of experience, with a lived experience as a quadriplegic, but just what she's done over the years with her background in law, geopolitics. Like every year she's travelling to the United Nations, whether that's in Geneva or New York. So she's fighting for what's right in here, in our backyard in Oz, and helping a lot of people in the community and taking bits and pieces from overseas and just seeing what works in other parts of the globe, bringing that home and just seeing what works and what doesn't work in Australia when it comes to people with disability. Like, everybody has the right to be free from harm and discrimination despite your bloody disability. And that's when things go wrong in the community, if it's a person, an organisation, some sort of entity, where it's put an individual with disability at harm, risk, whatever it may be, then you broadcast that to the human rights, the Disability Discrimination Commissioner. You let their team know so they can have and push the full force of the law. And it's just awesome just yarning up, just seeing her journey of, you know, where it all started with an acquired disability, quad like me, myself, and just her trajectory, you know, bloody despite your disability, just having a crack. Getting back in the driver's seat, man. And then next minute, and like I said before, she's flying all over the globe and getting amongst geopolitics. Those wheels aren't slowing down. They've been burning hard for years. Solid work. Love the yarn. And if you like the podcast, hit that subscribe or follow button. And we've also got a Patreon page. The link is within the description. So if you want to roll with the squad and become a patron, that'd be great. I want to thank our sponsors, Permobil Australia, the greatest electric wheelchairs in the land. Wouldn't be sitting in anything else but these four wheels right here, and they've got great assistive tech also. So righto, let's get into it.
And rolling.
G'day.
Hello.
Commissioner Rosemary Kayess. Thanks for coming up from Sydney, and really appreciate you just willing to wheel in and have a chat with me on the podcast. Appreciate it.
No problems, Jake.
Right, so you're pretty much your first year into your 5-year term as the Australian Disability Discrimination Commissioner. So before we yarn up about that and the importance of it, really important, and the functionality of it, just want to reel it back and just start off with where the inspiration of advocacy come from and where all that began in your disability journey.
It's a bit of a tricky one to ask, Jake. I mean, it's got several... It arises from several things. First and foremost, I didn't specifically set out to be an advocate. But there's always been an inner sense of justice for me. I'm the youngest of 4 and I'm the only girl. And there was lots of things in my life that my brothers could do that I couldn't do. So I couldn't go to their high school. I couldn't do Scouts. So lots of the things my brothers were involved in, I couldn't do. So that sense of gender inequality was brought home to me at a very young age. And I had a very, we all have the problem within the disability word of the word inspiration. But I had a fairly inspirational mother for the time. She was a businesswoman, and she was a very confident woman. And so she saw for me as many opportunities as she saw for the boys. Like, there was not. I had great role models in that sense that gave me confidence. And I came from a very close, very loving family. And my parents sought our opinions and asked our opinions. And they now, even though they've both passed away, they both have 4 very over-opinionated children. So I have a niece, and we actually now do believe it's genetic, that there's not a topic that we don't have an opinion on. So when I had my accident, my path had always been, my interest had always been in a kind of different direction. I was looking at doing alternative medicine. And so that aspect of my life changed quite dramatically. And so I really didn't know what I was going to do. So I sort of floated for a bit. And then I decided to do a degree in social science. And so I got interested in policy studies. And then the interrelationship between policy and law took my interest. So I didn't actually set out to be an advocate. I set out to be a lawyer, really. And much of the stuff that I've done has been as a lawyer, and I've worked very closely with people with disability and their organisations, but I've not been an active member of disability organisations. So the advocate or activist title doesn't sort of sit comfortably with me, because it isn't, I'm not one of those very active people, in more ways than one actually, but anyway, that's a different story. So yeah, I didn't set out to be an activist or an advocate per se. It's just sort of happened along the way. And it's mainly legal advocacy that I've done.
Yeah, and that's huge, because when it comes through the legal standpoint, and I'm just thinking, and I get it when you say inspiration, and it's how I feel when I'm coming across many able-bods that throw that word up in the air. But I'm looking at it from, say, when I went through, because I've just gone 15 years now with my spinal cord injury, C5, C6 cord.
I'm a wee bit longer, but we won't go there.
It's so good, yeah. And it just interests me, like when people at different stages of their life, when they've had their spinal cord injury, when they've initially gone through it, or the rehabilitation stage, and where, say, I've drawn, say, inspiration for the other people in chairs that have really helped me along the way, when everything's just been so acute. Like, shout out to, the mob that were working for SCIA back then, Spinal Cord Injuries Australia, and their mentors, and that meant a world to me. So, and I know you've been involved with that mob, but when you had Shree Hurley, major impact, because similar level of injury, and then you had Shannon Bates, and even though he's not spinal cord injury, it's still, a disability that affects the spine. So, and just seeing the way that life can be shaped regardless of being in, 2, 4 or 6 wheels. And, because I didn't have plans of to stop breathing and just keep pushing, keep the lungs going, and just saying, regardless of, where I was going to be, because I couldn't breathe or do all sorts of stuff, and you got to wait till the spinal cord heals up and just seeing where your level of injury is going to be. But it was great seeing that scope through them, but also like just taking the veil off it too, like just saying and just being real about it. Like, yes, this can happen. Yes, this can't happen. And yes, this maybe might happen. And it's good just being real like that, sort of not scaring people away off life, but just, just showing that path of when you get to that stage of getting in a wheelchair, what doors may open. And it's a tricky one. And still, like, when it's dealing with, if it's the people that if it's family, the community, colleagues, and just disability, and the continuous education and justification of certain things that you have to do with life. But, with me, I've always been an advocate, because before I was in a chair, like my youngest brother is, ASD level 2, so the amount of trouble I got in at school sticking up for him, and that's a whole nother story within itself. But yeah, so did you find, like, was there any other people with spinal cord injuries way back then that sort of plant some seeds or help, whether if they were in a chair or another disability, that sort of said, hey, well, X, Y, and Z, this may help, or even if you didn't know them, it's something you might have heard or saw on the media that maybe assisted you in your journey when you had your accident back then?
Oh, look, when I first had my accident, there was a woman by the name of Jenny Chapman who was a rehab person from England that came out with her then partner, and she was working with the Spinal Cord Injury Association. And she was the one that said to me, I was still in that stage of not having a clue of where I was going to go with my life after breaking my neck. And she said, you really should think about going back to study and, doing something with your brain, because you're not using it here. And so she was a great mentor for me in that respect. I suppose in lots of respects, the time just after the accident, I moved into a group home, and there was lots of people there with spinal cord injuries. So there was some that were great to get to know in terms of getting that reality check that you're talking about, in terms of don't let the spinal cord injury run your life. Have a life with a spinal cord injury.
100%.
So, if you wanted to, you could just become a creature of rehab and processes that are just so focused around maintaining the spinal cord injury and all the rest of it, but there is no time to live. So Superman always reminds me of Superman when I say anything about this. He spent so much time, so much focus on trying to walk again. He basically killed himself because he was ignoring the things like pressure areas and stuff like that, and ended up with sepsis and died. So you got to balance what you're trying to do in your life. And so, I suppose because I'm a C4 quad, can't move my arms, can't move my legs, didn't matter about when spinal shock wore off, you know. I didn't regain. I regained a lot more feeling and but I didn't regain any more movement. So it wasn't as though I was ever going to, you know, spend hours and hours in the gym trying to get the old tricep happening. No, that wasn't going to be a gig for me. So,
yeah, and were there any fusions back then, or was it all traction and weights, like through the healing process?
It was traction for the healing process. And no, actually anaesthesiologists love me because I don't have a fusion in my spine. So I've got really good flexion and extension, and they can stick all sorts of tubes down my throat. It's such fun.
Yeah, I'm fused from C4 to C6, but yeah, you feel the old metal in there, that's for sure, when you look certain ways, but, you know, it keeps a whole noggin afloat, I suppose, so. But yeah, it could have been worse, but, you know, I'm glad I'm just, you know, able to wheel around and, you know, talk to people like yourself and just getting the important messages out there and just being real about it. And that's, you know, and you knocked that on the head when you got Superman, right? And I've had conversations with a fair few mob, whether they were paras, quads, incomplete, complete, whatever it may be, and whether they think they're going to be up and walking tomorrow. And I'm like, and I just tell it how it is. That's just how I am. But I'm like, and there are a lot of good technologies out there at the moment, and you've, over your lifetime, have seen this, that and everything float through. Me the same within my 15-year gap and before that. And, you know, there's always hope but no guarantee. You know, and I know Elon Musk, like, if you're ever going to be listening to this with your Neuralink and you got it aimed at quads, you know, because he's got billions of dollars, if you can throw something at that and get it up and running, that'd be great, you know, because I know he's got the first quad and they've only just skimmed the surface with it, but, you know, that's not going to be a tomorrow thing either.
No, it's not a tomorrow thing, and it's not going to change my life. It's probably not going to change your life. It might, I don't know. I mean, but it's not going to improve my life if that's all I focus on. So.
Yeah, that's it. And were there power chairs back then? Like, I know they've been early in the piece.
I'm not a dinosaur, Jake.
Oh, no. No, but I knew they were in certain countries and not, like, Australia was one of the last. Like, even Permabil didn't, like what I'm sitting in now, you know, they were on the frontier, and especially in standing chairs, but even looking at the early iterations, like, even a lot of them weren't, you know, you're looking at the 60s, 50s, you know, 70s, like, a lot of stuff weren't making it to shores, and it was... Yeah. I just thought I'd ask because...
Yeah, no, in the 80s they did have power wheelchairs, and yes, they did have chin controls. So, no, I wasn't sitting in some corner in a manual chair. So,
Yeah.
No, I was able to harass people.
That's good.
From day one.
Yeah. Because I wasn't too sure with the rehab process because it's... And just what I see from different states and territories as well, where some people sometimes they'll put them in a manual and they end up in a power chair, or they're in a power chair and they ended up in a manual, and you know, it's a lot. Even now what I see, like when I wheel into Royal Ride Rehab or just Royal Rehab down there in Sydney in Ride, and I'm like, you lucky buggers, like going through, like looking at that facility, because when I had my accident I was still in the old one. So, and but at the end of the day, yeah, it was an old facility, but the crew that ran the show there with Dr. Webber and the rest of the team, you know, fantastic team and great job, and still doing what they're doing today. So, and no offence on the power chair stuff, but...
No, look, I went through North Shore. Royal Ride wasn't a thing back then. I did my rehab at QE2 in Campertown.
Yeah, right.
So, you know, back in the dark ages.
Yeah.
was after clay tablets, though, I can assure you. Just.
Yeah. And how was it? So going back to, you got through your rehab, so acclimating back to life. So how was it just, and, you know, and it's great that you had that person plant the seed in regards to picking up the study again, but like, you know, and I deal with a lot of individuals, you know, and even stuff that I've done, and whether it's uni, TAFE, and seeing where you got certain disability access to certain individuals that can help people within those facilities, and making sure that, you know, they're getting to the finish line with their degree, whatever it may be. So how was it back then when you were doing law at UNSW, yeah?
Yeah, well, it's on the side of a hill. The law faculty, when I studied there, when I was teaching in the law faculty, I started teaching when we were up in the library stack. But the law faculty and the social science faculty were both up on top of the hill, so that wasn't too bad. Though there were still lots of lecture theatres that were inaccessible. You know, we were still using a mainframe in those days for stats stuff, though I think that was only about my first, second year in social science, that there was still a mainframe for stats. Then we started working on the PCs for stats, but accessibility was difficult. It was incredibly difficult. It's funny. I gave a graduation address a couple of weeks before Christmas, just after International Day, and I was talking about how when I was doing my PhD studies, how my desk was propped up on bricks, and I used to have to wrap a rubber band around one side of a book and have I used to use when I was at home, I used to use a television remote control, and I'd use my mouse stick to slide the page out from underneath the television remote control and hold it down and read that page, and then clip the corner of the page with the elastic band on the other side, read that page, then slide it under the elastic band and then repeat. It'd take me for bloody ever to get through a book. And then I'd have to remember what I wanted to write down as notes, because I had to then move across to the computer to put my notes down, because I couldn't highlight anything or write in the margins or anything like that. So, yeah, it sort of must have been PTSD that I'd blocked that out of my memory until I started to write this graduation address. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that, and it's almost like the knowledge is, especially when it's, you know, with the newspapers and what you learnt back then, is forcing you to exercise as well, because you're getting full and not having that fusion in your neck, and just, you know, making sure that, because I know what it's like with me, if I'm just wheeling straight, and, you know, because I recline and decline on the hour just to distribute pressure. But I know what it's like, even if I'm wheeling around the shopping centre for some time, and how, you know, I got a pretty big head, so might knock it, you know, and how my neck feels over time. So, and I try and consciously do stuff through the day, like moving my neck around just to strengthen it up, like just little things. But it's sort of tricky when you're getting flat out with work and you're just forgetting that stuff. But, you know, I know my physio and OT's going to probably hear this and be on me about it, but, you know, but I try and keep up on all things that give me an edge wherever I can, like. But no, that's good. And did they, like, the faculty and the individuals there, like how was it with the acceptance, like, of, you know, you coming through with yourself in your chair, chin control, and trying to learn and doing what you do, and, you know, having some of these professors and individuals taking it seriously, that you're there to have a crack, and it's just not some bloody tokenistic thing going on. It's like, you know, you're trying to further yourself regardless of being in a bloody chair or not, to make sure that, you know, you're equipped and, you know, so then you can get that degree and then explore your options like anybody else, whether they're in a wheelchair or not. So
it's really hard to get past the what Stella Young coined as inspiration porn. And there's always that little bit in the back of your head that goes, you know, am I getting away with this? Because I'm sure we've all got, you know, a degree of imposter syndrome buried in us somewhere. But it's really difficult because you have those situations where people make this huge fuss of you over the stupidest, smallest things. Like, I remember being in London one time, and I've told this story time and time again.
Put it out there.
I was in London and we'd come in overnight late, and so I was late into the buffet area where the breakfast stuff was. And my brother and his wife and my support person were already seated at a table, so I came in by myself. And I was sitting there and I was just looking at the Bain Maries and seeing what was left, and this woman came up to me and she goes, "Oh, you are so brave. You're such an inspiration." And it took everything in me not to say, "What, because I want to have the baked beans, or do you know stuff about the pork sausage that I don't?" But I mean, there was part of me that she basically was saying, "You've made it from a hotel room to the buffet. How clever you are. You know, isn't that just fabulous? Let's give you a gold star." If she had known that I'd left my house in Australia, I hadn't spoken since at this point, so she didn't know I was Australian, or at least she didn't know I wasn't British. And so, if she'd known that I'd left my place 4 weeks earlier, gone to New York, spent a week in New York at a UN meeting. Actually, I'd spent 2 weeks in New York at a UN meeting.
Yeah, you don't muck around.
Then flown to Galway and taught a summer school for Masters Law students in Galway for a week, and was now in London to do some work with the Law Commission and catching up with some friends before heading home. Yeah, actually, if she'd known that, I would have gone, yeah, fair cop. That's that's an impressive little workload for somebody, regardless of the wheelchair. She knew none of that. And so I think for people with disability, it becomes really difficult. You get accolades and sometimes in the back of your head you're going, well, is it for me, or is it just these low expectations of people with disability? And we have such low expectations of people with disability. I had an experience at the cricket. You know, for years, my nephews and I have gone to the cricket on the second day of the test. And it's what we do. We do it every year, the second day of the test.
Nice.
Nephews and I go. And this year I was lucky enough to have my brother and both my nephews, because one nephew lives in Cairns now, and one of my nephew's sons with us, so there was a few of us. But anyway, we couldn't sit where we normally sit, and we're in a completely different section of the SCG, and it had sun from the word go. Normally we're in the shade. And I was, just getting really hot, and it was coming up to lunch, so I went outside right on the lunch break, and I was sitting beside a wall because, the broken leg, I was keeping it out of the road, and there was a crowd, there was people everywhere.
Yeah, don't want no one bumping it.
Yeah, and I was just sitting there beside the wall, and this woman came up to me and said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yep, I'm fine, thanks." Now, anybody would expect that that would have been the end of it. But no, 40 minutes later, 3 women constantly asking me and not accepting that I was okay and that I didn't need anything. And to the point that they kept escalating it to someone further up the food chain. And then the last woman kept saying to me, "Are you going to go back to your seat?" Well, yes, but they wouldn't even accept that. And she kept asking me, "Are you going to go back to your seat?" It's like,
come on.
yeah. So, like, they just think you haven't got a clue what you're doing. I don't know. Yeah. So it's really difficult. And at university and even as an academic, you always have that little scene. It's just people looking at the wheelchair and can't get past the wheelchair and think it's, fabulous that you can string a sentence together. Or, are you actually achieving something?
You so much. Ignorance is bliss, hey? And it was like last Thursday because Amy and I, my wife and I, went down to Sydney for my birthday because I hit the 4-0 last week.
Congratulations. Happy birthday.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And went and saw a band and like real...
What was the band?
City in Colour. So, yeah, so sort of like indie folk sort of music.
Oh, yeah.
And I followed because of the lead singer of the band, because I love hardcore metal, all that stuff. I'm right into all that type of music. Love it because I grew up playing it, still go to gigs all the time, festivals, all that stuff.
So for your 40th birthday, you go to a folk.
Yeah, but so I was in the Horden Pavilion, and being that type of music, it's really chill atmosphere because I love the different variations of music. I love all that metal, but I love all that type of soft, slow, but the musicianship of it too, because even though I can't strum a guitar like I used to, I can still, when I'm hearing it, I'm thinking where my fingers are going on a fretboard of a guitar, and just love his voice, everything. So, but up the front, because I know it doesn't get burly in a crowd like that, and my chair can raise up. So Amy and I are there, but then had the security guard come up and, "Oh, are you okay, buddy?" Yeah, but I'm like, "Mate, it's a pretty chill gig. I don't think there's going to be a mosh pit happening. I'll be fine." I know I'm back here in March because that singer, he's the clean singer in a metal band, and I was there a couple of years previous, but when it's like that, it gets a bit how's it going, so I'm at the back. I'm like, "No, mate, I'll be here in March, and yes, I'll be in the accessible section for when they're playing, but I'll be all right for this one."
You'll be back in the leper box.
Yeah, pretty much boxed in with the rest of them, But, yeah, it gets frustrating at times, and when, especially like that, when people elevate it and they keep pushing, and when your patience can wear thin, it's like, and your politeness can sort of wear thin too, and that endless argument of trying to re-educate people, does my head in, and it would yours and everybody else with a disability that goes through the same thing. So what was it like when you were, so you've gone through law, completed that, and then, taken on the directorship, steering the ship there a bit over at SCARE, Spinal Cord Injuries Australia. So
that was a very short stint, a very long time ago.
Still though, like what was that back then? And because I want to roll this into, like, because it's just looking at your timeline, because I think it's important where this leads up to your important work today and your term as a commissioner.
Well, the time that I was at Spinal Cord Injuries Australia, I suppose I had my social science degree. They were looking for people with disability to be on their board to sort of direct the changes. The 80s, like every bloody decade since I broke my neck, there's been big reviews and big promises that things will change, but, the song remains the same.
Oh, yeah.
And so they wanted people with disability to have a strong voice in that process. Spinal Cord Injuries Australia is the one and only disability organisation that I've been involved in. And I did stuff with them for a short time on their board.
Did you have any
I'm
influence?
not a political animal. I'm not.
Yep.
It doesn't thrill me in any way whatsoever. I like geopolitics.
Yep.
I understand. I've got a keen curiosity on geopolitics, domestic politics. Anybody's domestic politics, I'm not that interested in.
Yeah.
Geopolitics is a different game altogether.
Can make waves though, like even when just knowing that knowledge, especially where you've, because you're trip hopping, wheeling everywhere, getting your wings on in every, country, whether it's
breaking my leg in New York, getting pneumonia in New Zealand, checking out the hospital medical treatments in. Travel the world and check out their hospital health system.
Oh, that's scary too. But the thing is, you're having a crack, like regardless of disability or not, you're getting out there, and geopolitics is awesome.
Too stupid not to, really, Jake.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and I love that stuff too. I like knowing what's going on, like if it's disability or not, but if stuff can interrelate, and if it's having that little bit of knowledge, so when you've gone to the Northern Hemisphere and, if you're back with skier and it's just something that that can feed through, you got your meeting, you got the chair, you got the rest of the directors, and it's just having that bit of knowledge.
Look, that knowledge, that was very informative to me, those couple of years, I think it was maybe 2 years with skier.
Yep.
I mean, the thing is, what it did was it gave me a sense of what membership organisations are like. It gave me an understanding, and it's held me in good stead. And I met people that I'm still working with today, people that were involved in other civil society organisations like People with Disability Australia, and the former Commissioner, Graham Innes. It has held me in good stead. It's given me an understanding about membership organisations and the importance of organisations of people with disability. So they're managed, led, and run for people with disability. It's incredibly important that they've got a strong advocacy voice. I don't want to be in the front lines of those organisations, but I think they're incredibly important organisations, and I've been quite happy to work with them and be a legal advisor to them, but it's not my gig. It's, yeah.
Yep. But if you're looking at legal advice, right, so the Australian Centre for Disability Law, so, lived experience, education. So was there anything like within your experience through that you were able to put across the table that made any policy, legislation, any law change at all? Like, and I know you're not saying, political animal and all this sort of stuff, but it's just putting down the raw sense of what it's like, nah.
DDA.
I mean, that's huge, but that's massive.
Stuff. Yeah, and I mean, from the word go, being active in that community legal centre space with the Australian Centre for Disability Law, the development of the standards, contributions to all that kind of stuff, incredibly important. And again, you think of the people with disability that were all really heavily involved in that process. Their voices were just as important, but I suppose the role of the Community Legal Centre and ACDL or the Disability Discrimination Legal Centre as it was back then, was incredibly important because it gave a legal frame of reference, but it also had the knowledge because it had the casework experience behind it of running the cases for people with disability around access to premises or access to transport and education.
And they're all huge to education.
Incredibly.
Yep. So, don't sell any of that stuff short. You know, that's major impactful stuff.
Yeah, and luck's had a lot to do with it as well. I mean, what are the chances you get to the end of a law degree and you find yourself negotiating a human rights treaty? I mean, when I was doing my doctoral studies, the whole argument at the time was that the limits of discrimination law were quite obvious, and that we needed something that could articulate the unique and specific ways in which people with disability experience human rights abuses and violations. And so a thematic international treaty would be an international instrument would be the best way to go. And Italy and Sweden had put forward resolutions to the General Assembly. They'd been knocked back, and then Mexico came in and got one up and basically made my thesis null and void and pointless. So
yeah, right. And can you explain to the people, because I think a lot of people outside of Australia don't get, look, and it's really important when you're looking at the United Nations and whether over in Geneva, New York. I've been fortunate to be over in Geneva and just add a little bit of sauce over there, which is good.
Didn't I meet you in New York? I thought I met you in New York.
No, I
met you in Geneva.
Must have been Geneva.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, you're well seasoned, that's for sure.
I am reasonably well travelled.
Yeah.
No. As I've actually got to correct people most times on this. Everyone talks about how well travelled I am. I'm actually not that well travelled. I travel a lot to very similar places. I've done a lot in Europe, but fundamentally, I've never been to Africa. I haven't done a lot of Southeast Asia. I have done nothing of South America. I've basically been to Boston, New York, Washington and LA and San Diego. There's heaps of the States. I've never been to Canada. And I mean, a lot of that's because I can't do the Machu Picchu Trail and I can't do the Big Five safari. But yes, I have travelled a lot.
Yeah, but you go and, and it's important places that you go into, and the information that either is coming from you or coming from others or that's getting absorbed. So, and I know a lot of, UN stuff, it's soft law and all of that, but can you explain just to the listeners and viewers just what a resolution is and, and how it can be an instrument or put forward to whether it's an emergency resolution or something that's not as hasty but needs to get put forward to try and make some change, whether it's in one country or another?
Well, the General Assembly is the main body of the United Nations. That's where 193 countries come together and act as what you could call the community of nations. So a resolution is just a proposal that's put forward to the General Assembly, and the General Assembly can vote on it. And, they vote on it. It can be adopted by consensus, so everyone just agrees, or sometimes they do actually have to vote. You'll hear most Security Council votes go to votes. Resolutions go to votes. And so you'll generally hear how many people have voted for and against it and who have abstained. So the resolution from Mexico was a proposal that was put forward to the General Assembly in 2000, and it was to have an international instrument that to consider an international instrument that looks at the human rights of people with disability. And I just happened to be somebody with a disability with a social science background and a law degree that specialised in international law. So I was just the right person at the right time with the right educational and skills background, I suppose. And so off I went to New York, and here I am today chatting with you.
There we go. And you think Australia still has a pretty good representation there? And I know, like, you know, working with Damien over at FPDN there, and just representing mob with disability, as in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders from many different nations across this continent. And do you think there's still a pretty strong representation from Australia, and do the international community get us?
Australia's pretty active. Australia does good things in this space. GFAT's really active in the disability space.
That's good.
I've had a good working relationship with GFAT over a long period of time, and 2008 they came to me about their new disability inclusive development strategy, and I've worked with them quite closely ever since. And they are very active in the disability space internationally, and they really do drive the leadership of people with disability, which is really positive to see, especially through their development program.
That's good, and good for other people that are listening if they want to tap into that, you know. So if it's knowing more about here or overseas or different countries too.
Yeah, and the Department of Social Services do have funding, as you know, to go to the Conference of States Parties and to support the engagement of people with disability through their representative organisations, which is the way it should happen, to go overseas and gain experience and build the capacity of organisations of people with disability here in Australia to be able to engage in political participation here in Australia, but not only in Australia but overseas.
Yeah, it's good you put that out there, because a lot of people don't know about that, you know.
Yeah, well, if they're connected with an organisation of people with disability, they should be asking about it. But it also should be about developing the skills of the organisation. It's not a holiday fund for people to trot off to New York.
Got to put the work in.
Yes, you go, well, yes, you know that. It's no picnic, but it's a really good experience.
And it's good to be heard too, you know, regardless of how loud your voice is, as long as the message is true and sound and it's getting put across and people take that on, and it can make, you know, if there's any effective change or whatever it may be to come from it, that's its main purpose. And if it can add to an instrument or tool and, you know, make, you know, be positive, that's great. So when you're travelling, who's your preferred carrier? Like when you're flying, I always get interested about this stuff.
Oh, look, Geneva, I can really only fly Emirates because
they're great.
Qantas code shares. Well, everybody has their experiences, Jake. I'm not commenting.
Yeah.
Emirates has also, you know, meant that I've got there 3 hours and I've got to check in, and it's taken 3 hours just to check in.
Feeling your pain there.
Yeah, so I still prefer Qantas.
Yeah. That's all. Yeah, that's who I fly
and
with.
But that could be just saying that's the best of a bad lot.
Yeah, yeah.
Look, we'll see what happens with the aviation reforms. I'm biding my time. We'll see how the standards development goes, and we'll see how the major carriers respond and how they engage. I'm still holding a full-on inquiry in my back pocket, just in case I have to pull it out. But there needs to be significant change. But there needs to be significant change about how we conceive as a community who the average traveller is. The cabinetry that's being built, I mean, it's not just people with disability that struggle to get in and out of the cabinetry as it's established. They're trying to make business class and premium economy and that far more exclusive, and they're trying to get as many people as possible into economy, and it's just making it, less and less accessible for just about everybody. So,
do you have anybody reaching out to your office in regards to how they can formulate this equation a little bit better and be more inclusive, or what?
No, I haven't had anybody reaching out, but I'm hoping that through the standards process there'll be strong engagement. It's still a work in progress how the standards will be developed. It's supposed to be a co-design, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I hope so, because I've had some run-in with some carriers and, where we've taken it to the CEO and then they've promised the world and a budget for a disability, this and that, and then try to give the benefit of the doubt over that period of time and fallen through. And I'm like, they just haven't done anything.
Yeah, look, some industry standards hopefully will be useful. Look, I would just like one standard approval process across all airlines and domestic and international routes for batteries, for God's sake. I mean, they are not lithium, people.
No. The only lithium batteries that I'm starting to see in power chairs are like for your four-wheel drive, like your X8s, but I still feel a little bit sketchy about them because, the amount of stories I hear, it doesn't matter if it's your Teslas or your electric bikes and these things going up in flames.
iPad.
Yeah. At least I can chuck that off my lap if I'm sitting in a chair that's lithium batteries and she goes alight and I'm on my own, I'm in a bit of strife there.
Yeah, just a touch, yeah.
Right, so I just want to jump into the NDIS, the National Disability Insurance Scheme. So,
okay.
Yeah, so
I'm not a recipient, I'll just let you know that now.
You're not a recipient? Yeah.
No, I'm not a participant.
Right, okay. Yeah, that's good. But what do you, okay, well, if you're not that's all good. So regardless.
So I don't know the ins and outs of it personally.
Okay. But what's your generalised thoughts on it? So because I know where people, especially that, because I know a lot of people that if it's car accidents and it's insurance, because people don't get that, whether it's where you got now, where it's spinal cord injury, brain injury, eye care, and where they take care of individuals in New South Wales.
One's an injury and one's, okay.
Yeah, but what's your thoughts on the NDIS and how it's helping individuals? Because you get a lot of people ringing up your office about certain situations to do with the scheme itself.
Look, yes, okay. First and foremost, academically, the concept of the NDIS is brilliant. It's world class. In fact, I'd say it's world leading.
Agreed.
Has the implementation held up that concept? Yes and no. I think there are people now that are in a much better position and have the supports that they need to lead a positive life for themselves. Do I think that's the case for all people? No. I think there are genuine gender biases within the NDIS process, and the rates of packages that women get as opposed to what men get.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is significant issues for people who have been very much institutionalised most of their lives, and that there is a huge chunk of people in the several thousands that are still in exactly the same situation, come group home, service provider structure that they were in 2014, and that has not changed in any way whatsoever. The only thing that may have changed is that their outings are no longer bowling 3 times a week. They only go bowling 2 days a week. I think that's significantly problematic. The biggest problem, I believe, with the NDIS is that there was absolutely no action on the National Disability Strategy for 10 years, 15 years. The shutout report basically outlined just about everything the Disability Royal Commission outlined, but we still got no traction. And the financial pressures were always going to be on the NDIS, because without any changes within mainstream society and people having access to mainstream services, people were going to have to rely on what they could get from the NDIS, which was always going to blow the NDIS out, because the NDIS
100%.
was doing both jobs. It was doing what the strategy should be doing, plus doing what the NDIS was supposed to do. So do I think the NDIS holds up its promise? No, I think there are some problems.
It's like any scheme.
Yeah, but the biggest one is losing what John Walsh would say was the insurance heart of it, in that you need to make mainstream society and services far more accessible to take pressure off the NDIS, to give people greater access, and for it to not carry the load.
Yeah, you got to balance that, and it is tricky. So when it comes to, now that they're pushing it back on the states now, now it was all federal, now they're going to see how the balance goes. And I knew it was always going to be a forever changing scheme, mechanism, beast, whatever you want to call it. And like, I'm glad the way that you put it. If you heard that, Mr. Bruce Bonner Haiti. So, but they got a lot of work to do, but as long as they've got the right people in the room, and it's always going to be, a continuous evolving scheme. Like, it's billions of dollars, it's millions of people, and disability is so vast, whether it's physical, psychosocial, cognitive, and just getting people to understand,
Look, I think there's lots been said about the increase in children who are neurodiverse. And I think a lot of that is because our education system needs a huge overhaul. I mean, just the school refusals demonstrate that the education system is not meeting the needs of kids with disabilities. They're not meeting the needs of all kids in many, many ways, obviously. And so the education system really needs to change. I mean, we shouldn't be fixated on diagnoses for ADHD and autism and stuff like that, because we should have systems that respond to it. And you should be able to have a skilled resource teaching fraternity that can identify weaknesses or strengths in a kid's learning that, the system is built to be able to work with.
Yeah, and they 100% need that. I totally agree with the overhaul because, we work with a lot of clients and coming from whether it's high school, public school and talking straight to Education, New South Wales, Queensland, whoever. And it's like they're in their own little silos and how much funding goes to each different separate school. So, and you get people in Education New South Wales, I like to say because this is where we are now and we're here on Darkinjung country on the Central Coast here, but just seeing how people even within that system, they don't talk to each other, and it's good if what you're talking about can just be systematically rolled out through a system and get funded all the same, not because you hear people about the funding and how it gets extracted here and moved there, and then it's an argument between the education minister from the state to federal and all this carry on. They just need to have a system in place and keep it that way and just persevere and don't have another party that comes in and change it up because, and I know...
Don't start me on education. I'll start on private education and you really don't want me to start.
Oh, that's a whole separate podcast, hey?
Oh, private education. Yes, it's my biggest hate in terms of Australia.
Yeah. And what do you think with the new Minister, Amanda Rishworth? So, some shoes to fill there jumping in. Mr. Bill Shorten, he's out. And because how do you think she'll go? Have you got much idea or background knowledge or just thinking how she'll just wield that sword? And it's good that you were talking about females and the sort of the balance. Do you think she'll get in and just... And hopefully she hears this because that's super important, like gender equality and just making sure that, high tide... Because I don't like saying high tide raises all ships and just having that sole captain. It's high tide raises all canoes, regardless of your gender, disability, whatever. It's making sure that... Because it's true, like I see a lot of different plans and different disabilities and I even see it within family structures. I'm like, well, if they're twins and it's a boy and a girl, why has that person got that and that person doesn't have that? And it blows my mind, and that's where they crack the whip and hopefully this new minister can, raise the bar a bit there. So what are your thoughts on that?
Look, I'm sure Minister Rishworth will come in and she'll be very much au fait with the NDIS. I mean, she's been Minister for Social Services for the whole of this government's life. So my hope is that she'll have strong connections with the disability sector and that she will listen to people with disability. I think the experience of the NDIS review and some of the outcomes, and I understand the imperative to keep the NDIS financially secure, but too many blunt instruments are just going to have a negative impact on people with disability. And we, as a community, will pay the price anyway. But people with disability will pay a higher cost. And I don't necessarily mean that financially, I just mean in terms of the impact on their lives.
Yep.
So I still have faith that the NDIS will find a way, but I think there's a few too many blunt instruments being introduced in terms of trying to manage the NDIS. So hopefully we get some greater action in terms of whatever the nebulous concept of foundational supports are.
Yeah.
And other processes to drive greater mainstream change, and hopefully some of the stuff that the Commission's working on will be able to help that. So
I hope so. And I hope so it doesn't fall too much in the negative path to where your office is just getting bombarded with every which way, and, you know, and then having those stern words with either the Quality and Safeguards Commission or the CEO of the scheme or the ministers that are, well, not just federal but state ministers now too, you know, so, and just trying to create and balance that ecosystem, and like you said, the foundational support's like very, very tricky. So, and so like yourself, like, well, like I was involved there too, like when it had to do a bit of a strategic direction and being a part of some of the different reference groups to do with the Royal Commission into the violence, abuse, neglect and exploitation of people with disabilities. So with over the 200 recommendations, like, do you think it's got a bit of teeth and it's got some traction? I know there's the what Royal Commissions and after the findings and what can happen and what doesn't happen, but in this one in particular, where do you see it going? Has it got a bit of grunt or what?
222 recommendations. We've seen 13 accepted and 117 accepted in principle. Not a lot of clarity about where the 117 in principle will go, and but there's a couple that there's uniformity and agreement across all states and territories and the feds. So one that, you know, I hope will get some traction, and I've put my hand up to help with that, is a roadmap to inclusive education. I think that's incredibly important. I think the sooner something starts to change within the education system for kids in general, but in particular for kids with disability, the better off we'll be. In terms of other areas of the recommendations from the Royal Commission, I will have to be a little bit more patient just to see what happens with the states and territories, because at the moment there's not a lot of consensus across states and territories in terms of some of the big ticket items, especially OBCAT. So restrictive practices is an area that really needs to be looked at.
Oh, yeah.
And OBCAT, for those that don't know what OBCAT is, it's the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture. And that optional protocol is an agreement that countries that have ratified the Convention Against Torture sign this allied treaty which gives jurisdiction to the Subcommittee on the Prevention of Torture to say you can come and visit our places of detention and see that there's no bad shit going down.
Oh, there's some bad shit going down.
Yeah. Anyway, so basically because Australia's ratified, the Subcommittee on the Prevention of Torture can rock up here to Australia anytime they like and go, we want to check out your places of detention. And we've agreed to that. That's the whole, you don't don't ratify OBCAT for any other reason than for these visits to happen. And the other thing that you agree to do is set up what they call a national preventive mechanism. And the national preventive mechanism should be able to monitor and, keep stats and all the rest of it.
Private institutions don't like that much, keeping track.
No.
That's why Journey's just been handed over back to the public system.
You can't have private jails, Jake. It's just an oxymoron.
FEMA camps everywhere, all sorts of crazy stuff.
Yeah, you're commercialising law and order.
It's insane.
Yeah. Anyway, don't start me on that either. It's a bit like private education. So basically, you've got to agree for the subcommittee on the prevention of torture to rock up to Australia and go give us a look at your places of detention. The national preventive mechanism is kind of set up. So anyway, SPT rocks up to Australia. They get to New South Wales and the Perrottet government go, no way, you can't look at our prisons and our places of detention. No way, go away. So they go to Queensland and Queensland does exactly the same thing.
Of course they do it up there, right.
So the whole basis for us ratifying OBCAT was to say, sure, you can come, you can do this, but yeah, there is obviously not either commitment or knowledge that they were allowed to come and check out places of detention. And the national preventive mechanism has only, well, I'll say it the other way round. The large three most populous states do not have a mechanism that feeds into the national preventive mechanism. So our commitment to the standards, human rights standards for people who are being held in places of detention is a bit dodgy around the edges. So especially when the definition of places of detention as it's seen by the Subcommittee on the Prevention of Torture includes psychiatric facilities, forensic psychiatric facilities, group homes, disability justice centres. So, and lots of restrictive practices happen within those frameworks, child protection mechanisms, aged care facilities, over-medication.
Oh, some of the chemical restraints have been slapped on people. Like,
chemical restraints, physical restraints, mechanical restraints.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's a big area, and I can't see a lot of movement in that, and I would like to see a much more movement in that space.
Yeah.
Indefinite detention, something that we've been trying to...
Yeah, let's put them on remand for 10 years. No worries.
Well,
no charge, no nothing.
Well, it's not even remand. It's the people
It's insane.
It's the people that get put through justice diversion because they're found unfit to plead. So lots of questions around justice that really do need resolving. So whilst I think there are some things that can be progressed from the Royal Commission, I think I don't feel a lot of traction across the board, especially for some of those big ticket items around. Look, the Commission itself couldn't come to grips with segregation.
Yeah, right.
The chances of being able to address it within the community is not looking good.
No. When you're looking at segregation or even when you're looking at isolation now, you know, even kids, it's not just adults that get put in these ISO units at, you know, 15 to 30 days. It's insane. And then, you know, they get additional charges because they've wrecked the toilets or gear inside that small space. And don't think that just Dondale was that was the only place that was doing that in Australia up in the NT. There's multitudes of them.
Dondale was supposed to close.
Nothing.
Dondale is still open.
Yeah. And everything that's happening here in New South Wales, that's nothing up in the NT. We've got a lot more jails than everywhere else. Close to, you know, 20, 25. I don't know. It's a fair few.
98% of the kids in Dondale had some form of disability.
Oh, makes me sick.
The Royal Commission talked about the criminalisation of disability, and there's lots of talk about that now in terms of the what's been happening in Queensland in their very strong push for law and order and the impact that will have on kids with disability, the use of watch houses.
Yeah. They'll keep dragging down the age. That's what they'll keep doing up there. It's, just got to have the right people in place and, you know, the right enforcers. But if you're talking about enforcement or if it's looking at scope, and congratulations again about your appointment as a commissioner. So can you explain to just individuals like what your role is, the scope and some of the powers that it's got, just so people have got a bit of education in and around that. So people might hear that, but they don't know what, you know, if they talk to your office, like what are they going to present to you if they're in strife or whatever, you know, negative or positive things going out in the community.
Okay, well, it's the Australian Human Rights Commission basically was set up with the intention that Australia would have a Human Rights Act. We got the commission, we never got the Human Rights Act. So there's a series of commissioners and there's a series of discrimination acts that are attached to it. Each has a commissioner attached to it. So basically my role is to promote and to a certain extent be involved in the protection of human rights for people with disability within Australia. So that's my broad overall mandate. I'm to give advice to the government and I can do inquiries and I'm not involved in the legal casework since the 2006 Brandy case, the 2000 case of Brandy. They removed the tribunal aspect of the commission role. So the commission used to be the tribunal of first instance for disability discrimination cases. But it was seen as constitutionally out of line. I don't necessarily agree with the Brandy agreement, but
No.
that's just me and a couple other lawyers. That you couldn't do both policy work and tribunal work. Anyway, so the situation is that there's a separation between what the tribunal does, what the commission does. The commission now only does investigation and conciliation, and then for a binding decision, it has to go to the federal court or the federal court of Australia or the federal circuit court. So I'm completely separated from the complaints mechanism. So when people lodge a complaint, I've got no control of that. That goes through the complaints section, and my role is purely policy. I can intervene in cases as an amicus curiae, which is a friend of the court, to give specialist information about the law.
That's good.
But other than that, I'm not involved in complaints. So it's basically looking at the protection of human rights and the promotion of human rights in a broad policy context. And I'm involved with what Australia does internationally in terms of international law and human rights for people with disability.
Rosemary Kayess, Commissioner Rosemary Kayess, you're absolutely knocking it out of the park, and it's important, the work that you're doing now, but, you know, your whole journey and where it's led to what you're doing. But is there anything like strategic direction or what you can see or what you want to do, like within your term, that you sort of hope to see what can be accomplished?
Oh, look, I'd like us to get a little bit more sophisticated about disability. I think I'd really like to lose the cutesy kind of titles and names and stuff like that people put on things. I've become the bane of some of my colleagues' existence because I've come in and gone, oh, that's a really stupid name for that project. Can we do it to something grown up? So I'm a bit over the, you know, everything's something ability or, you know.
Yeah.
You know, the public service use recruitability. It's like, oh, for God's sake. You know, you don't need catchy, funky titles to, you know, we call it, you know, a gender pay gap because it's a gender pay gap. We don't talk about a disability pay gap. No, we talk about recruitability and includability, and it's just for me it just reinforces that whole inspiration porn, that whole low expectations of people with disability, and the infantilising of disability. You know, so that irritates me a little bit. You look at gender policy or you look at First Nations policy. And I'm not saying that gender policy in Australia is just spot on and kicking huge goals, and the same for First Nations stuff. But the words and the framing is very much equality, about rights. It's about framing it in that sort of focus. And you come to the disability policy and it's about inclusion and ability and reaching potential, and it's like, no. And if I'm true to my profession, being a real lawyer, I look at those words and I can read into those words so much paternalism. It's not funny.
Yeah, okay.
Yet I get a very different sense when I read gender strategies and statements and position papers, and same with First Nations. It's a far much more grown-up approach to it about, you know, rights and equality rather than reaching our potential. It just sounds, well, isn't that very generous of you that you're going to allow us to do that?
Yeah, potentiality. No, I get it though, and you know, because you got a lot of organisations. You know, I purposely didn't go like, you know, with Culture Connects like our org, but I purposely strayed away from that because I've sort of got that feel about it as well. And you still got every other organisation that's popping up and it's got a ability or whatever on the end of it, and it's a tricky one. But it's good that you've laid that out, so hopefully people do take note of that and it can just formulate the system a little bit better. But just make people think, regardless if you got a disability or not, and it's just having another viewpoint, and you know, and from yourself a very strong one. So appreciate it big time. Is there anything else that you want to lay out there in the regards of the work that you're doing? If you got any more travel going on in the future, what's planned for Rosemary Kayess, Commissioner Rosemary Kayess, that is? Well,
I'm trying desperately to get my leg back to 90 degrees after breaking my femur, so I can get to Geneva for the committee session in March.
Good luck.
So I'm on a tight time frame for that one. Work-wise, I've got a couple of irons in the fire that I don't want to say too much about, but sort of relates to the stuff I've been talking to. It's about getting some policy settings around equality for people with disability in the work context, but also looking at the NDIS and the influence it has on segregation. So I'd like some serious and some clear understanding about the role that NDIS can play in furthering segregation and entrenching segregation of people with disability. As I said before, I'd really like to be involved and make sure that a roadmap to inclusive education gets off the ground. But I'd also like to see some low-hanging fruit type things. So get at least some better data that they promised us around indefinite detention, so there's greater understanding and some identification of how to deal with the problem around indefinite detention and the lack of ability for people with cognitive impairment to be able to access the justice system on an equal basis with others. Get some action around restrictive practices. I'm getting a bit tired, Jake. So, yeah, there's a few things that I really want to pursue, and hopefully I can find some partners to work with, because the Commission has some resources, but, you know, we're not loaded.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of different government entities that hopefully do hear this, or when you guys put the work in, and you know they can feel the traction and just see what's real and jump on board and know that it's just and true to bulk up to make sure that that you're broadcasting the message and what you're talking about can overturn or chip away at something, and like we know, whether it's state or federal, that things do take time. But, you're in the driver's seat and literally the wheels are moving forward. And I know you're tired, but they'll keep moving forward. And Commissioner, and I like the way that you put it, roadmap, because that's the right way of saying it, whether it's starting with the low-hanging fruit and it's guiding through the way, like where you're talking about education and the sorts. And I look forward to seeing some of those irons that you got in the fire and seeing, just when they present themselves. So really appreciate you coming in today and driving up from Sydney, and looking forward to yarning you down the line. And I hope that you make it overseas in March. So really appreciate it.
Well, I hope I haven't bored all your listeners too much, but it's been great yarning with you, Jake, and it's really lovely to catch up again.
100%. Thank you.
Thank you.
See, folks, solid yarn. And it's good that she broke down what her role is as a commissioner and the powers of that. If things are going wrong in the community, whether it's individuals, organisations, companies, whatever, then the full force of her team of legally what they can do to make sure that people are safe and bloody free from discrimination. So don't be afraid to speak up. If people are coming at you, if you can't access a certain premises, there's all sorts of reasons why. And look up the Commissioner's website and it will detail what they can do if certain things go wrong in the community. Really, check it out. It'll help. Speak up. And if you like the podcast, hit that subscribe or follow button. And we've also got a Patreon page. The link is within the description. So if you want to roll with the squad and become a patron, that'd be great. And if you want to get in contact with me, you can get me via Instagram at streetrollingcheetah or email, one word, streetrollingcheetah@gmail.com. We've also got a Facebook page, Keep Rolling with Jake Briggs, so check it out. I'm on LinkedIn, Jake Briggs. I want to thank our sponsors, Permobil Australia, the greatest electric wheelchairs in the land. Wouldn't be sitting in anything else but these 4 wheels right here, and they've got great assistive tech also. So righto, see you on the next one.